Paul Mason there. Well, joining me now, the writer and broadcaster David Aronovich, the columnist Zoe Williams, the campaigns officer of Cambridge University Conservative Association, James Wakely, and Rachel Young, who's also a student at Cambridge University and I think has been involved in sit-ins. Rachel, you'll put me right in a second. David, to you first, when you see these protests, what do you think?
I think that's me several years ago. Well, more than several years ago, and I identify very strongly with what they're saying and doing. It's funny because I don't agree with them about tuition fees, and therefore couldn't kind of honestly sign one of their petitions about it. But it seems to me that quite a lot of young people worth their salt would be doing exactly what they're doing.
Do you think it's a sort of Zoe? It's a sort of rite of passage. You know, when you're a student, you have to go on a protest, don't you?
When you put it like that, it makes it sound like it's a rite of passage and everybody will grow out of it and you know, they'll come see sense and they won't mind paying their, you know, civic duties. But I think this is quite different. The kind of protest, we never even had a genuine grievance. So we were going on stupid protests about animal rights, no offence. When you can line up behind a genuine grievance...
What do you mean? You mean you had an ideology about things, but it wasn't affecting you personally?
It wasn't affecting us personally. Then later on there were the May Day... well, they weren't strikes, so they May Day protests, and they had very little kind of tying them together. So you can't really cohere around that kind of thing. That really is just shouting and kind of showing your fist. I think with something where you do have a genuine grievance and an object and something in mind, and a lot of people have lined up behind it, yeah, I think that can radicalise people.
Does that chime with you, Rachel? Do you think that this is just a very pragmatic thing that's going on now? Do you feel like you're being led with an ideology now, or you want to get something done?
I feel like this is actually about more than just students. Yes, we've seen sixth formers come out and school students and university students, but there's also a wider austerity programme that's going on, and in our occupation we have been talking a lot about how we stand in solidarity with those people. We aren't just students, we're also people who are going to be wanting to find jobs when we leave university, and so in many ways, like, this isn't just a rite of passage, maybe it's a rite of passage for the entire country right now, because we are facing some of the worst cuts that we've ever experienced, cuts that are affecting ordinary people everywhere. But
realistically, I mean, you're not going to do sit-ins as students for the next load of public sector workers that go on strike, are you?
I mean, solidarity is a really, really strong thing, and actually what we do have to realise is, as David Cameron has said many times, we are actually all in this together, ordinary people who are being affected by these cuts which are highly ideologically motivated. And David Cameron talks about the big society. Well, here's his big society. This
James,
is people coming together.
James, I'm wondering what it's like for you. I mean, you're in the Conservative Association, presumably you're backing the government policy at a time when it must be really hard to be on campus, isn't it?
Well, you know, I was talking with Rachel earlier, and about 100 to 150 students have regularly attended the occupation. But a Facebook group against the occupation has attracted 500 Cambridge students, so I'm not necessarily in that much of a minority.
And they're saying, what would the 500 are saying? Yes, raise tuition fees.
Yes, I mean, I think one of the most unfortunate things from my perspective is that the linking of the debate about higher education with other wider issues like the austerity programme, like cuts to public spending, has actually diluted the debate on higher education. I think we should have a serious debate about higher education based on what's fair for the taxpayer and based on sustainable funding for the future of higher education.
Do you say that loudly? You know, you'd get punched if you said that, wouldn't you?
It's very difficult, but I think if you're passionate, you shouldn't allow yourself to be intimidated.
I don't think anybody's trying to intimidate him. I would add that actually the occupation's had hundreds of people come in and out because we do have open access to the doors. 270 academics have signed up to support the occupation. And let's face it, it takes a lot less effort to click a button on Facebook than it does to actually come down and do something.
Yeah.
What do you think is the long-term effect that these kind of protests will have on you know, this student generation?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Tariq Ali was saying when we were doing it, we were asking for a whole new syllabus, a whole new way of being educated. But I think it's that kind of level of radicalism that actually alienates people and people drift off. I think if people do a sit-in, they find that their voices are listened to, or they're heard in a different way, or they're cast in a different role vis-à-vis the state, then I think it will radicalise them, yeah.
I just don't agree with that. I mean, firstly, the policy will happen. Unless the government loses the vote, which is almost unimaginable, those fees will come in. They'll come in, and the next set of students will pay them.
Wait, so,
then
well, let me Rachel, just respond to that. So nothing that you're doing, in the eyes of David Aronovich, will make any difference?
In the eyes of David Aronovich. Well, first of all, we have seen a lot of the Liberal Democrats wavering over the tuition fees vote. Cable himself said he might not even vote for the proposals that he put forward.
I think that's
fairly major.
It's fairly major. It's fairly major and absolutely ludicrous. The ludicrousness was signing up to a pledge which actually no government could keep. I mean, it was all very well for Peter Hain to say what he was saying earlier, but his government instituted the Brown Review, and they would now, if they were in government, be implementing something pretty much like it.
I mean, that's the beauty of opposition, and that's the beauty of being the third party. You can say what you wanted to say to please however many groups you wanted to please.
Return to the
Whereas
point.
when you're in government, you have to take the tough decisions.
Well, fine. Of course you can go mouthpiece for Cameron. But the point is, if half your coalition
I'm not
isn't
an
even...
official spokesman
if
for the
half your
government.
coalition
Or he could just be saying, what he believes.
If your coalition isn't even going to vote for your own proposals, then to say that it's unthinkable for them not to be voted in is completely absurd.
So, can I just explain a little thing? It seems kind of rather...
because I don't understand voting at all.
You don't understand the arithmetic of the House of Commons, because actually they will pass this on Liberal Democrat abstentions. Otherwise, they would never agreed it in the coalition programme in the first place.
I want to get away slightly from the vote itself and sort of bring you all back to this sense of protest. I mean, one of the points that Paul Mason was making, which was really interesting, was that in the old days, if we can call it that, in '68, it was a very elite group of students, you know, the sort of the Berries and the Marxists and all the rest of it. Now you're talking about potentially half the population trying to go to university. I mean, that's everyone. That's people who do catering courses, that's working mums, that's more mature students. It's a different thing, isn't it?
It's true. And it's true that a large number of people are affected, but it's not true to say that a significant number of those people don't agree with the policy or something like it, or that whichever policy party was in power, somebody would know. I mean, a graduate tax would not be unproblematic for exactly the same group of people when they came afterwards. No, you don't, because nobody's promoting the tax yet. If it was coming in, then you probably would.
Rachel, when you're doing your sit-ins, is there a pragmatism to what you will argue for? I mean, would you say no tuition fee raise, yes graduate tax?
No, the Cambridge Occupation has voted explicitly that we would like to see free education. We believe that education should be a right and not just for the privileged.
Meaning a tax increase?
Yes, meaning that we believe that corporations and banks that were bailed out to the tune of £850 billion should be funding these kind of things, the super rich. It's simply an ideological effect to try and target ordinary people.
Sorry, I really want to make this point. Government, the cutting of public spending has been justified on pragmatic, not ideological grounds.
I believe that
as a percentage of GDP, public spending will be the same at the end of the cuts programme as it was under Tony Blair. In real terms, public spending is going to grow.
But let's look at who it's affecting. Let's look at who is being affected by these spending cuts.
This is,
and actually, David Cameron...
Wait a second.
If I may.
Last point.
If I may. I think there's been a lot of misinformation about student fees. These fees are not upfront costs. Students won't be paying higher fees. Graduates, when they're earning, will. That's the key point.
Okay, is that what you're saying? That's the question. So actually, you think that what is going on now, you know, not to treat you as species at all. That's that's terrible. But you're looking at these guys.
What's important to me in a kind of long term is the fact that they're discussing, and they're discussing in a rational way, and they're discussing policies, and they're able to do it. And I think actually what you are seeing is the future generation of people doing in PMQs what you saw Cameron and Miliband doing today.
I mean,
well, I'm sorry, I absolutely don't want to be on PMQs. You know, I'm not.
Said the same.
Go on.
No, and I'm not, and I don't think that we need careerist student leaders.
Is he patronising you?
He is patronising me, and it's also patronising to say that students haven't read the Brown Review and they haven't read the proposals. Students understand what's being proposed, and they oppose them. In Cambridge University, the Cambridge Students' Union has voted to support the occupation and their proposals. Many countless
has not had a referendum. CUSU, the Cambridge University
they voted using their genuine voting mechanisms, as have...
They can't claim to represent the whole university.
Well, that's another issue, isn't it? The student,
of all of the students at Cambridge.
Here's someone
not representative.
Here's someone who clearly knows. You know, you've done your homework on this. You've read the stuff. Okay. Do you think that you will take this level of interest to other issues? I mean, I think that's, you know, when we talk about the sort of radicalisation, that's maybe a false word, but Zoe was talking about all the other sort of, you know, slightly amorphous places that you took protests to.
I mean, I think the interesting thing is that, you know, I don't think I don't think students 10 years ago would have noticed public sector cuts. I think it's only because there's a massive attack on students and their way of life that they're actually branching into other areas. I'm not being patronising in saying that. We certainly wouldn't have gone on the streets about public sector workers. I mean, it's just so unsexy. So I think it does have the impact of kind of plugging you into a lot of other measures.
We'll leave it there.